Hi, I'm Erik Voss, and Mission Impossible Fallout was one of the most exhilarating movies I've seen this year, even if the film is basically an excuse for Tom Cruise to play Evel Knievel. Hey guys, I feel like jumping off a building today, so if you want to roll the camera, it's cool. All right, yeah, let's make a movie. Let's rewatch this movie scene by scene for all the interesting details you might have missed. Subtle Easter eggs and callbacks to earlier films in the series, but also the cinematic techniques and influences that helped the filmmaker pull off this insane feat. Spoiler warning if you haven't seen the movie yet, and let's get started. Okay, the opening shot of this movie is a dream sequence with Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise, exchanging wedding vows with Julia, Michelle Monaghan, Ethan's wife from Mission Impossible 3. We saw them exchange vows in the hospital chapel in that movie, and now this seems like a more legit wedding ceremony. But then the vows shift from vows of marriage to the vows Ethan took as an IMF operative. And the minister is revealed to be Solomon Lane, Sean Harris, the head of the syndicate from Rogue Nation. Now this is the first time a villain from a previous Mission Impossible movie has returned. Also the first time a director has returned. Chris McQuarrie said that in order to make Fallout feel like a different movie from Rogue Nation and keep up that tradition of each film having its own voice, he changed out his entire production crew with the exceptions of his editor and his stunt coordinator. This stream ends with a nuclear explosion wiping them all out and the haunting visual of Ethan's face and skull blasting away into ash. Intentional or not, this image definitely echoes the nuclear nightmare of Sarah Connor in T2 Judgment Day, which ends with the same kind of terror. And of course this stream's backdrop is this mountain lake location, which we later learn is Kashmir, shot in real-life New Zealand. This opening moment foreshadows the movie's climax, in which Ethan's fear of a nuclear standoff in Kashmir with Julia and Lane is realized. Ethan wakes up to receive his mission, which is given to him by a mysterious messenger, and they have this exchange. Fate whispers to the warrior, "A storm is coming," and the warrior responds back, "I am the storm." Now, a version of this is a meme that has spread around online in recent years. Tom Brady actually quoted it on social media as the Patriots headed into the playoffs. But yeah, the saying definitely reflects Ethan Hunt's role in this story as a one-man storm that can basically save the world. And his secret message is contained in a book, Homer's The Odyssey. The Odyssey is a Greek epic poem, part 2 of a story following the Iliad, and it tells the story of the war hero Odysseus as he returns home to Ithaca after the Trojan War to his platonic ideal wife Penelope. The story of this movie is an odyssey of sorts for Ethan. It's part 2 to the story of Rogue Nation, following war hero Ethan through a series of odd trials as he makes his way back to his platonic ideal wife, Julia. Ethan then sets out to Berlin on a mission to prevent Lane's followers, the Apostles, from getting their hands on 3 plutonium cores. Returning are Simon Pegg as Benji and Ving Rhames as Luther, whom Ethan decides to save instead of retrieving the plutonium. And from there, the movie shockingly jump cuts to what appears to be the consequences of that decision. Detonations of those nukes in Rome, Jerusalem, and Mecca, the 3 holy cities of Catholicism, Judaism, and Islam. But like the nuclear fake out in Ethan's dream, this is all just a setup to get Nils Delbrück to talk. And this trick is also a callback way back to the opening scene of the first Mission Impossible film, when the IMF team used a similar phony set to get a guy to talk. Ethan and Luther do a really good job playing up this drama, and notice what Luther says.
"Ethan, that's not who we are."
This is also kind of a callback to when Ethan similarly tried to force a confession out of arms dealer Owen Davian in MI3. Which arguably could have just been more theatrics by Ethan that just didn't work in that case. Fallout ups the ante of the Mission Impossible mask running gag, with Benji posing as CNN news host Wolf Blitzer. And then they're off to the next step, at the airport. Ethan meets with Alan Hunley, played by Alec Baldwin. He joined the series in Ghost Protocol as a CIA director, who then took over the IMF and Rogue Nation, but now he answers to CIA director Erica Sloan, played by Angela Bassett. And her special activities point man is August Walker, played by Henry Cavill. He, of course, has a mustache, which McQuarrie said was intended to be a red flag that his character is a bad guy. This mustache caused the most facial hair drama since I showed up to my sister's southern wedding with this. Ain't they got razors in California? In the middle of production for this movie, Warner Brothers needed Cavill to actually come back to do reshoots as Superman for Justice League, asking him to be clean shaven. But McQuarrie said that it would have required $3 million and production delays for Fallout, to which his studio said absolutely not. So Justice League was required to awkwardly cover up Superman's lip using CGI, which many of you found distracting. Ironically, Fallout later did have to delay production anyway when Tom Cruise broke his ankle. McQuarrie said that he felt bad for DC over the bad timing, but really the takeaway is that with any contract dispute in Hollywood, just wait for Tom Cruise to shut the city down by hurting himself. This leads to the amazing Halo sequence, the first of many impossible stunts in this movie. Right as it begins, notice how Ethan snaps at Walker to follow his instructions, or quote, "The last thing to go through your mind will be your kneecap. Is that clear?" And then Walker responds, "Crystal." That's a little little reference to Tom Cruise's famous line about following orders in the movie A Few Good Men.
We follow orders or people die. It's that simple. Are we clear?
Crystal.
This jump appears to take place in one unbroken take, which the director wanted so that we could experience this all from Ethan's perspective. That's why when the lightning strikes him, the sound cuts out for a couple seconds. Now, this was obviously super tricky to pull off. They needed one camera operator to hand off the camera to another who performed the jump with Tom Cruise. And they shot it at dusk with limited light, so Cruise had to stop himself midair 3 feet from the camera with a 3-inch margin of going out of focus. The actors and the crew would do 5 to 7 practice jumps throughout the day, all so they could wait for dusk when the lighting would be just right, and then at that point they'd only have 3 minutes to get one take. The final version that we see in the movie was stitched together with 3 takes. Ethan and Walker make it down to this party in Paris where they're supposed to intercept John Lark. Instead, they run into Ilsa Faust, Rebecca Ferguson, the MI6 agent returning from Rogue Nation. And Ethan and Walker duke it out with the contact they assume is Lark, played by super talented stunt fighter Liang Yang. McQuarrie actually acknowledged that the fight choreography with these 3 men in the bathroom stalls was inspired by the physical comedy of silent film star Buster Keaton, whose work influenced the practical gags you see in a lot of these kind of movies. And actually at the beginning of this fight, as the two close in on Lark from the sides, you can still hear the club's bass beat in the background. The director said that he wanted it to evoke a heartbeat to reflect the intensity that these 3 have as they wait to make a move. And after Ilsa shoots Lark in the face, Ethan must take his place, hoping that Lark and the White Widow have just never met in person. He actually pulls the same trick with Moreau in Ghost Protocol. The White Widow is played by Vanessa Kirby, and her speech is actually a tribute to her mother, someone named Max. She says Max was something of a paradox. She had a fascination for paradoxes. Ethan recognizes these words because the White Widow is the daughter of Max, who was the character in the first movie, played by Vanessa Redgrave. Actually, this paradox reference is a callback to her exchange with Ethan.
So you are something of a paradox.
Well, that depends.
On what?
Whether you like a paradox.
So this leads the White Widow to make an offer to Ethan. She'll give him the plutonium cores in exchange for him extracting Solomon Lane. But Ethan manages to avoid having to commit any truly heinous acts as John Lark by going rogue on the rogues, ramming Lane's truck into the River Seine and escaping the cops and Ilsa and the Widow's men, all through the streets of Paris. Now you may have noticed that McQuarrie used a lot of low-angle street-level shots while Cruise zips around the streets. He said that he was inspired by a short film shot by French director Claude Lelouch called C'était un rendezvous, which sped through the streets of Paris from a car's low-angle point of view. Film actually got Lelouch arrested after he screened it. Lane's extraction brings the team to these London tunnels, where Hunley initially appears to pull Ethan out of the operation, but it's actually just all a ploy to trick Walker into outing himself as the true John Lark. And when he talks to Lane, he's actually talking to Benji in disguise, which calls back the classic Mission Impossible move from the first movie, in which the traitor reveals the truth to someone they think is a villain, but is actually a good guy. And Walker snaps at him, "Why did you have to make this so effing complicated?" And that makes the first time the F-bomb was dropped in a Mission Impossible movie. A shootout leads to Hunley's death and Walker's escape, and Ethan pursues him on foot over the London rooftops. Now this is a stunt where Tom Cruise shattered his ankle, and they actually used a specific take when it happened. You can see where Cruise smacks into the ledge in a way that no one should hit anything, and then he pulls himself over that ledge and limps out of frame. He's limping because it's broken. The first part of this shot where he runs up toward the ledge was actually recorded months after Cruise healed. Walker escapes by helicopter, and the team follows them to this mountain village in Kashmir, which Ethan's initial mission rundown mentioned as the disease outbreak containment site. As a mountainous region of India bordering China and Pakistan, it's a particularly delicate region that irrigates a third of the world's population. McQuarrie says that his approach with his Mission Impossible movies has been to really focus on the geography of all the action. Most movies begin with a pitch and a script, which then leads to the development process where things change, and then a production process where they actually make the movie. But with Rogue Nation and Fallout, McQuarrie and Cruise worked backwards from that. They start with which stunts they want to try and where to set them. So when Cruise told McQuarrie that he wanted to set a helicopter chase in a mountain pass, they were like, okay, but then they struggled to find a country that would allow a big movie star to do that. Eventually, New Zealand gave them the green light, so McQuarrie restaged the country's mountainous terrain as the Himalayas. And this third act is set up to mirror the climaxes of a couple past films. Like in Ghost Protocol, Ethan goes solo to disable a nuclear trigger, while Benji and Luther and the rest of the team coordinate with support work. And like in Mission Impossible 3, Julia must play an active role in saving the day. Ethan chasing Walker in the helicopter was one of the most thrilling sequences I've ever seen. Cruise, of course, did all the stunts himself, including pulling the helicopter out of a nearly uncontrollable death drop, something the stunt flyer said could not be done, and dropping from the rope onto a cargo bag, something that looks so real that McQuarrie said one of the crew members radioed in saying, "I think we lost Tom." The chase ends with Ethan and Walker having crashed on this slope cliffside. Now, while conceiving of this sequence, McQuarrie described the way two marbles fall into a sink and how they eventually collide with each other at the drain. The location scouts couldn't find any cliffs that were sloped like that in New Zealand, but they did find Pulpit Rock from Norway. So they used that to create a virtual terrain to set the scene upon. During this whole sequence, McQuarrie uses a lot of mounted camera shots on the side of the helicopter to put us in the cockpit with Ethan. So when his and Walker's choppers tumble down the slope, we roll with Ethan. This echoes the visual earlier with Lane in the flooding truck as it flipped. This way, the worst physical danger that the villain finds himself in, the hero must also go through in this movie. And the final action of the film calls back two early Mission Impossible sequences. First, Ethan is forced to climb the cliffside with his bare hands, like the opening shots of Mission Impossible 2, and he uses the hook harness of the helicopter against Walker. Youch. Similar to how he used the helicopter's stuck wire against Krieger at the very end of the first movie. That covers all the stuff I noticed, but a question I'll leave you with: do you need Tom Cruise to do all his own death-defying stunts to enjoy this movie? Look, a big part of this series and the marketing centers around the fact that Tom Cruise is putting himself in danger, and don't get me wrong, that's part of the fun for me too. But with Cruise breaking his ankle, I just worry we're getting off a little too much on the physical punishment that this dude is exerting on himself. Nah, screw that. I want Tommy screams to be real. Comment down below with your thoughts and tweet me at Erik Voss or follow New Rockstars on Twitter for updates on our videos. Like this video, share it around, and subscribe to New Rockstars for breakdowns and analysis of all the movies you love, including all the Marvel movies and Star Wars and DC, all of it. Thank you for watching, and you know what? Let's end this video by jumping out a window. Here I go.